Fantastic. Awesome. Welcome to Business Spotlight, where today we are joined by the incredible Richard Devitt from Zimbl. Richard, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Let's dive straight in. Tell us, Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, and how long you've been doing it for.
So I'm one of the founders of Zimbl. There are 3 of us in total, and we're just entering our 5th month of trading. And we rent EVs by the hour. We deliver them to you and collect them from you using a folding e-bike, which is in the back of the car. So you get all the convenience of car ownership, but none of the long-term costs and none of the negative environmental aspects of owning a petrol or diesel car.
Amazing. So if I travel up from London and I need to travel around Leamington, Coventry, Warwick, you will meet me at the train station, drop me off an electric car. I can use it at my pleasure and you'll scoop off on the bike and then meet me back at the train station to collect it. Am I in the right ballpark?
That's exactly what we're aiming for. Yes, we're only 4.5 months into our journey. So we're starting in Banbury in Oxfordshire, but that's exactly the model we're building.
Wonderful.
Give us a little bit of time and we'll be in all those locations and you'll be able to do exactly that.
Brilliant. Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense to me. What motivated you to start the business?
Well, the short answer is it seemed like a good idea at the time.
And the long answer?
The short version of this story is my business partner and I were sitting at his table talking about where does the future lie? What do we want to do next with our careers? We were kicking around ideas around e-bikes, e-scooters, e-cars, e-everything. And I had a bit of a lightning bolt moment. And I was like, I've got it. The answer is e-cars rented by the hour. And he looked at me and go, well, that sounds great. How do we do that? I was like, no idea. I'm going to go away and work it out, which is what we spent the next couple of years doing. And here we are trading and trying to make that a reality.
Could I please dive into a couple of years figuring out? Can we do?
So, as anyone who has tried to set up a business in the real world will know, there is a world of difference between having an idea and then being able to implement it in the real world, particularly if your idea involves a lot of heavy equipment or real world assets. This wasn't a website we were creating. This wasn't a new app we were coding for. This involved, we had to get cars, we had to get finance for all the cars, we had to get the equipment, we had to get the booking app made, and what was most painful was getting the insurance we needed, because if you're renting EVs by the hour to the general public, insurers have a lot of criteria for that. And as a startup, it was even harder. So I always anticipated it being expensive. It took a good 18 months before we had the insurance we needed to be able to do it. And there was no point in us spending money until we had the insurance in place, because without that, the rest of it was not possible. So we effectively were almost ready to go, ran into this brick wall, had to solve it, and then we had to do everything all over again. So it took a lot longer than we dared, hope for. But here we are. We're there. We're operational. And in all fairness, some of the delays have mostly proven to be relatively good things, because we found other resources. We found other systems which we didn't have at the time, which we do now have.
Brilliant. So it almost gave you some time to think and expand on the idea.
It gave us the time to implement it in what has turned out to be the best way possible. The original core ideas we came up with, we continued to work on them throughout that time. Had we been able to go earlier, it may well have been better. Who knows? It may not have been. Who can tell in the past? But yeah, we got there, which is the moral of the story. Just keep plugging at it.
Yeah, absolutely. An obstacle turned into an opportunity. Tell me, Richard, has it been everything that you hoped it would be?
It's going well. There you have to war between the I want it to be 100% utilized right here, right now, immediately, versus the I've run a business for quite a long time. I have a reasonable expectation of what the world should do. So it's going on the positive side of the reasonable for us. So we've got over 250 subscribers on our system. We've got 5 cars. which we're renting out daily for either full day rent or short number of hour rents, depending on what the customers are wanting. Today, just as an example, we've had all of the above. I have day rentals out, and I've only just got back in time for this interview from collecting an hourly rental. So it's going well so far.
Good. Oh no, that's good to hear. What do you do that that stands you out in the EV industry?
So there's a couple of things. My background is retail principally, and fine wine retail as it happens. And for my experiences, everything breaks down to a single unit, which in that case was a bottle of wine.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of a car, it's not a single car, it's a single hour of car usage. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people look at car as a single large piece of inventory or an item in their lives. I look at it as it's a 15-minute, an hour, a 2-hour slug of time that you need a car for. The other 22 hours of a day, you do not. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do differently compared to everyone else. And we combine that with delivering the vehicles, because almost no rental companies really deliver a car to you, particularly not only for what might be only an hour, might be a half day, might be a full day. But that's what we do. So the idea is to give all the convenience possible to the consumer. So that's what makes us stand out. I make sure personally that every new consumer who signs up to Zimbl, rents a car for the first time, when they get their car, they sit in it, they know where all the controls are, they know how our app works, they make sure they're comfortable with the whole exercise. Because a lot of these people have never driven an EV before. So they're like, well, how does this work? What do the buttons do? So I want to make sure they're comfortable, because then I distinctly hope they will come back.
Yes, absolutely. So customer experience is something that's really high on your priority list.
Absolutely pivotal, because car ownership is a generationally ingrained behavior. For the last 100 years almost, cars have been a mainstream part of our societies. Our parents, our grandparents, they've all had cars in many cases, and breaking these habits is very, very difficult. And making sure the consumer is utterly comfortable with what Zimbl offers is of absolute #1 priority for us.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. What would you attribute your growth to? Obviously, I know that your trading time has been the past 5 months, but in those 5 months.
So the customer experience is, as you said, pivotal. So customers who they have a great experience, they tell other people they have a great experience. They post testimonials on social media, they give recommendations, they tell their friends about it. This is more pivotal than any other form of marketing for us. So the other one is simply getting the word out, because a lot of people will find a use for a Zimbl, every day, every week, every month, just occasionally, if they know it's there. So growth comes down to, making sure that when people think about a new car in their life or a new use for a vehicle in their world, Zimbl pops into their heads in some fashion or another. And some of these things are incredibly old-fashioned. We produce leaflets and put them through doors, as well as all of the modern tools of marketing. There's a lot of social media advertising going on.
Yeah. Does social media, do you have a social media page? Do you have any?
We do.
Good, excellent.
So yes.
Feel free to share.
So we have a Facebook page, which, if you're looking for some amusement, my fellow owners seem to think pictures of me and videos of me doing physical exercise is hilariously funny. There's been a couple of instances on my e-bike which have been filmed, which are fairly entertaining, so I'm told. But the cars are big, they're a large piece of machinery, so they're very photogenic in that regard. And so we do a lot. But one other thing that makes us stand out beyond anyone else is we do our own charging of our vehicles. So we don't rely on the commercial charging networks. We don't rely on the grid. We have a green fuel power generator and our own charging infrastructure. So we charge the cars as well as rent them out to people. So that way we guarantee that we can charge the cars quickly and get a car to you as close to fully charged as humanly possible.
Amazing. Now that is a USP. That's a USP. Richard, tell me, and this has just come to my mind now, actually, so apologies that it wasn't on the original original question list. What's the quickest that you can get a car to somebody? So if I thought I need a couple of hours, I need a Zimbl, and I need it for a couple of hours today.
Mm-hmm.
What's the quickest time that you could get one to me?
My personal record so far is 7 minutes.
Ooh.
So now that doesn't mean I would like everyone to test me on that, but just today I had someone give me 35 minutes notice, which has happened several times. So I would prefer more notice, if I'm honest, but you know, when people need it, we're there, and that's the goal. So now at the moment we're only operating in the Banbury area for the simple reason that when I deliver you a car, I have to get on my e-bike and get back to base to get the next car. So there's a bit of a limit on that. But if you need it for a day, we will deliver it anywhere in the local area. So the outlying villages all have access to Zimbl, nearest towns and cities as well. We have clients in Oxford who want a car for a day, a weekend. It makes sense for us to take it to you.
I love it. 7 minutes. Gosh, that's quicker than a Domino's. I love that. How do you balance your personal life and the demands of running a business, Richard?
I have a very understanding significant other. So I've been running my own business for quite a long time. I was co-owner of my wine merchants before I started Zimbl. So I'm fortunate in that my significant other recognizes the demands of a director are different from the demands on an employee. So she gives me the time I need to get things done. She's very sympathetic to my sometimes very erratic schedule. So that's how I balance it. Other than that, it always comes down to making it the priority. You know, I have a young child as well, so being there is important. So you know, I've worked from home a great deal since she's been born because I wanted to be here for her as she grows up. So you make it a priority, you make it work. Some days it's harder than it might otherwise be, but that's the cost of doing business, so to speak.
Yeah, make it a priority. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. What would you say your biggest learning has been? Now, if I may say in business in general, please, because it sounds like you've got an awful lot of experience in previous business as well. So
I've been around the block once or twice. The biggest learning usually comes down to trying to balance your projected expectations in a business sense against the realities. Invariably, we hope for the best, but not enough business people, particularly new businesses, plan for the worst.
Right.
So, you know, they expect their best case scenario to happen and they financially plan accordingly for it. I was in retail, you know, coming out of the last financial crisis. I was in retail going into the COVID. You know, you learn these were fairly brutal experiences in terms of beware of your expectations. So you really have to plan for the worst and in everything. So you hope that your business idea is brilliant and everyone will love it and everyone will spend money on your service or your product or come to your shop or whatever it might be. If you don't plan for the fact that no one will show up for the first few months because no one's heard about you, you may run out of money before your idea gets off the ground. So I think of all lessons I would impart to anyone getting into business for the first time, it's probably that one. Now, there are a myriad of other things, some of which are industry specific. Some of them are lessons to be learned across the board. But that's probably one of the biggest ones. That and cash flow management.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly dull as a part of the business, but it's so vitally important because if you run out of money, pretty much everything else just stops at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Could we dig into that a little bit? So yeah, that we say that it's like it's almost sort of obvious, but it's not for some. It really isn't for some business. No. So let's dive into that just a little bit. So what's been your experience around that, and what's the number one tip that you have around cash flow management?
Always plan for the worst. So most businesses, especially those who occupy physical space or have a physical product, you know, you have to buy a product, you have to rent space if you have a shop, there are a lot of fixed costs. Now, many of those you can project 2, 3, 6, even 12 months into the future because your rent is usually going to be the same for the term of the lease. Your fixed expenditures, you will know. So you can project those out. It can be as simple as simply putting it in a column on a spreadsheet down the line. And then you will have other costs which are perhaps less fixed. You may not know how many part-time staff you're going to need, but you know you're going to need X amount of hours in a month. Therefore, you can plan and project for that. You may have an idea what your income's going to look like, but you can never guarantee who is going to walk through the doors, who is going to click on your app, who is going to buy your product. Therefore, you must take whatever historical data you might have and do your most likely case scenario with a healthy amount of caution in it, has been my experience. And if it goes better than that, then fantastic. You have more leg room and to work with. If it goes worse than that, then there's probably an error somewhere in your calculations. You need to go back and find it. I learned quite early on that monitoring cash flow daily, every transaction, knowing exactly what's coming in, what's going out, as far into the future as you can, is critically important. So you spend a lot of time with spreadsheets, and it can be incredibly dull. And I unfortunately seem to be a born administrator, so I spend my life surrounded by spreadsheets and documentation and contracts and everything else. A lot of entrepreneurs, they are utterly passionate, deeply so, about whatever it is they might be, whether they are wine merchants, whether they are chefs, whether they are carpenters or mechanics, whatever they might be. They may be utterly brilliant at these things, but they may not be able to administer their way out of a paper bag. And this is where a lot of businesses fail. It's not on the quality of the product. It's not on the skills of the entrepreneur. It's on the simple business admin. Did they plan for their taxes? Did they put aside enough VAT for that quarter? Did they calculate their PAYE requirements sufficiently? It's incredibly dull, a lot of this stuff. But if you don't get it right, you can get severely burnt early on.
Absolutely. So your first point about managing expectations is really emotional, and then your second point about managing cash flow is really logical. So if you've got both of those in your corner, you've got your eyes wide open.
I mean, for me, with Zimbl as a new business, because nothing's ever been done quite like Zimbl. There have been car rentals that have gone by the hour. There are EV rentals out there. No one's quite put it all together in the way that we're trying to do it. So I don't have a historical data set in an industry that I can draw on. I'm having to create it as I go. So you have to apply the strictest logic you can to the data points you have, which aren't very many for me at the moment. And on the other half, you have the more intangibles. You have the emotional reaction from your customer base. You have the anecdotal evidence that is given to you by said customers. And then you have the combination of emotional, intellectual feelings you get in a business where it's like, I can feel all of this information is telling me this. I can't quite prove to you how empirically, but this is what I think is going. And sometimes you have to run with that. I mean, a lot of businessmen will call it a gut instinct, which is a fair enough analogy. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. I mean, I have made decisions based on pure logic, pure numbers, which have turned out to be incorrect. I've made decisions based on emotions, which have turned out to be incorrect. And I've made decisions on both, which have been utterly bang on. Business is like that sometimes, because ultimately you have a set of human beings who are a customer base. If they don't do what you thought they were going to do, because humans don't, then you're like, okay, that's not where I thought this was going. Let's adapt. And for Zimbl and any new business, I would suggest being able to pivot what you're doing, how you're operating, what you're offering is absolutely critical, because you don't always know where it's going to go. What you thought was your business might not turn out that way. You have to be prepared for that. I'll give you an example. In Zimbl, we designed it as an hourly business, replace your morning commute, your afternoon commute. We didn't intend to offer a day rental option because that's not what we designed it for, but existing rentals are largely done on days. That's what people expect. That's what they know about. And my business partners were very adamant that we should offer a day rate, and it's like, okay, we'll offer it, and it has been very popular with us so far. So it's one of those things you have to go where the business tells you it's going.
Listen to the demands of the customers, and weave in the new with the tradition is what I'm hearing. So you've got an opportunity to change the face of EV rentals. However, there's some traditions that are ingrained that people still want. So it's
very much so. If you go too far out the box, people get slightly scared, and that actually affected our choice of vehicles. The cars that we currently have, they're MG5 estate cars. When you sit in them, it doesn't feel like you've suddenly got into a very high-tech car that you're slightly scared of. The speedometer it looks like a traditional one. Your dashboard, it has a traditional layout. So when you get things like, this feels like a car. I've driven one of these before. This doesn't scare me so much. The fact that it's an electric engine with all of the technology those cars come with, plus all the technology Zimbl has put into the cars as well to run the business, suddenly doesn't feel like a huge scary thing, because not everyone is comfortable with high technology. Some people are actively put off by it. A lot of people don't quite understand what the difference is between an electric car and a petrol car are. We get all kinds of questions, some of which every day we get a question like, I haven't heard that one before. I'm gonna have to find an answer.
What's been the best question asked that you've never heard before?
Where'd the petrol go? I'm fairly sure he was joking at the time, but I've had it a couple of times. The one that gets me more often than not is the various myths and legends about EVs put across by people who don't like them. So we get it's almost like you have to take out the trolls in people's heads a little bit before they accept it, because people have a lot of fears which are just not justified by the current state of the technology. 5 years ago these would have been much more legitimate concerns. Range anxiety, how far do they go? What happens if it's cold, the car doesn't work? It's like, no, these are not real world issues, because you convert those questions straight back to a petrol or diesel car and people go, oh yes, I realize how silly this thought is. So we have a lot of that, but the cars themselves are great fun. An internal combustion engine car is, it can be quite loud, it's quite an aggressive piece of equipment, and an EV car is utterly quiet. The power goes straight from the motor into the driving wheel, so they have great torque, and if you want to drive fast and have fun with it, you really can. They've got a lot of sounds in them which make it sound like something out of Star Trek, which is what particularly tickles me. So as you might be able to tell from the background.
I was just about to say, well, considering your background, absolutely, amazing.
So, it's about making the consumers comfortable. So whatever their questions are, whatever their fears, misconceptions, you treat it with knowledge. You give them the information they want, you show them how it works, you let them know. It's like, no, it's completely reasonable to ask the questions if you don't know. So ask away. I'll have a conversation with anyone anytime about the business and EV, what it's like in the real world. Anyone who wants to learn about it, those who just want to knock it down for the sheer sake of knocking it down, one has to hold one's patience a little bit.
But it sounds like it would be a driver's dream if it's got some power behind the wheel.
Absolutely.
So, definitely.
If you like driving as an activity for driving's sake, then these cars are a joy to drive. I mean, I've driven quite a few different EV models, not just the one that Zimbl has, and they are so much fun to drive. They're not as loud. They don't have the grunt which a lot of people who really love their petrol cars want in it, but they have a different set of joys. So I've been driving over 20 years myself, and I'm relatively young. They're great fun, and I was never much of a car person before I got into this trade. Particularly, I viewed cars as it's four wheels and an engine, get me from A to B. I'm not terribly fussed. Now it's a whole different level of interest and passion, because they are far more interesting.
Oh wow! So Zimbl sparked your interest in automotives. I love it. Well, we always end on the biggest question, but segues really well from our previous one. So, Richard, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and do you have any words of advice for other business owners who are looking to grow?
So 5 years for Zimbl will be spread as far and wide across the country as we can possibly grow in that time frame. So many more Zimbl bases of operations around the country, so people will be able to start their journey in one town, finish it in another, and they only pay for the amount of time they actually need to use a car. The rest of the time they save their money. So that's really where we want to go. In terms of scale, it'll depend on how fast we can get there. So it's a trade for us where we feel the sky's the limit. So it'll be a question of how fast can we run to get there. Advice for other business owners who are looking to grow. I mean, there will be as many answers to that question as there are people you put it to. For me, it comes to a combination of listen to the customer, because if you're running a business which depends on a mass consumer base utilizing your service, you have to provide them what they want, even if it's not exactly what you thought it might have been. So don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to change your plans, change your mind, admit that you made a mistake. I mean, you make 10 mistakes a day running a business. If you don't acknowledge them and learn from them, you're doomed to repeat them. So that, more than anything else, that's where I go. Be flexible, pivot where you can. If you need to completely change radical direction, then do it. If you survive the first 12 months, you can always pivot back if that's where it wants to go. So keep it flexible. Try not to get absolutely stuck in a plan of action that you can't possibly adapt.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Listen to the customer, give them what they want, and be flexible and pivot as a business owner. Don't be afraid to change your mind. What a brilliant way to end today's business spotlight. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. There have been an awful lot of insights and learnings there, so I can't wait to share them with our community. And I want to thank you and hope we speak again soon.
I look forward to it.
Thanks, Richard.